6.5 minutes after 7 o'clock in Trinidad and Tobago. And we know maybe on a Friday, holiday period, things might be light and a little more relaxed and so on. But we have this issue now in the aftermath of the THA elections, the part 2 of 2021, with the 14-1 triumph of the Progressive Democratic Patriots and the issue of Watson Duke. Well, yesterday, as many of you would be aware, the Attorney General, Faris Al-Rawi, filed a motion in court seeking clarification of the law in relation to Watson Duke holding his post as Deputy Chief Secretary in the Tobago House of Assembly, while at the same time serving as the chairman of the Public Services Association, well, he's actually president of the PSA, and a member of the Registration, Recognition and Certification Board, for which he is in receipt of remuneration. A statement from the Office of the AG, the Attorney General and the Minister of Legal Affairs says that a construction fixed date claim form was filed in the High Court seeking an interpretation of, I had to put on my glasses for this one, Section 16(8) of the THA Act, Chapter 2503. The AG had previously written to Chief Secretary Farley Augustine on the matter. However, on Wednesday, Mr. Augustine told media the Tobago House of Assembly does not answer to the Attorney General. To try and shed some light, not necessarily on the specific issue of this, but on the broad issue of the relationship legally between central government and the THA. We are joined by Senior Counsel Martin George, very much part of the Tobago business landscape as well, to give us some understanding and clarity of that situation. Mr. George, can you actually do that? Clarify the situation for us?
Well, the first thing I want to clarify is because I'm not Senior Counsel.
Okay, I promoted you.
Yeah, but let's just look at what Section 16(8) says. You know, we can have discussion without at all interfering or touching upon what is before the court.
Sure.
Section 16(8) says a secretary or the presiding officer shall not engage in any trade, business, occupation, or other undertaking for profit or remuneration other than that of serving as a secretary or the presiding officer. Now, what we would have seen played out is a scenario where Mr. Duke, in the public domain, and this has nothing to do with at all trespassing upon what is before the court. In the public domain, he has already indicated that he is, firstly, he said that he was going to serve as, he's going to continue serving without remuneration. Then secondly, he said he's tendered his resignation and he's hoping that it is accepted and it's supposed to be effective December 31st. I think what the AG is saying is, look, there's a bigger, broader picture here, so let's get some clarity on it going forward. Now, I mean, of course, one would have thought that if at all the government and, of course, the Attorney General were really, serious about getting clarity, they would recognize that the THA Act itself needs a total overhaul. So rather than engaging in what appears to be piecemeal, nitpicking at it, they ought to have really said, hey, listen, if we want to get the bigger, broader picture, let's engage in some constructive overhaul of the entire THA Act, because we saw from the 6-6 debacle that, clearly the Act itself was deficient. It didn't cater for any scenario where there was a tie. So there are many other areas of the Act that need to be looked at. So I think that there would have been a whole lot more credibility to the proceedings if it were in the context of a genuine attempt to do a comprehensive overhaul of the THA Act to make it a more workable document going forward. Be that as it may, for you, we have to work with it as it is. And one of the things that I would suggest that needs to be looked at and needs to be clarified going forward, and it's something that I think the new THA administration has to be aware of, is the fact of how this relationship between central government and the THA is supposed to work. And I'll tell you why, for zero. There is a judgment that was delivered in the High Court by the Honorable Justice Nadia Kangaloo. And in that judgment, and I'll just give you the name of the matter, this was the matter of the Constitution of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago, and this was also a construction summons, right? This was in the matter of the construction of Section 25 of the Tobago House of Assembly Act, together with the fifth schedule, and it was between the THA and the Attorney General at the time. So in this case, the THA took the Attorney General to court. This was a 2013 matter. It's a matter I was involved in, so I know the matter intimately. So this is a matter whereby the issue was where you have a national policy, can the THA set its own policy on that issue in contravention of national policy, or can the THA act in a manner contrary to what the overarching policy is as determined by the Cabinet of Trinidad and Tobago? And for you, listen, in this matter, we examined every aspect of the THA Act. We traced its history, its genesis. We went back to Hansard. We got all the reports and recordings from Hansard. Even when the debate was taking place for the first THA Act, I'm talking about the original act, and then, of course, you had the current one, right? So therefore, we looked at everything, and what we really were able to distill out of that, and this is what the judge's judgment revealed, is that the cabinet, by Section 75 of the Constitution, really has the overall power in Trinidad and Tobago. And notwithstanding the power that is granted to the THA under the Tobago House of Assembly Act, they are still subsumed by this overarching power of cabinet given by Section 75. So even though the THA has its own specific responsibilities under the fifth schedule of the THA Act, and we know that there are several areas set out there. You have about 35 or 36 areas set out there. Notwithstanding that, it is still under the overall guidance and direction of the cabinet. And it's something that Tobagonians need to recognize and understand. So that's why I'm saying the bigger picture really would have been to look at some comprehensive overhaul of the THA legislation.
And just precisely on that point, Martin George, I mean, invariably, when we chat to you or other legal luminaries and so on, it invariably comes around to the arcane nature of our legislation. The fact that much of it, with the very best of intentions from our legal luminaries of years past, you see so many things cropping up that are open to wide interpretation. Why is this so?
Well, Fazil, I could tell you, I mean, I sat for 3 years as a member of the Law Reform Commission of Trinidad and Tobago. And that commission, at least during the time I was there, we did tremendous work. We looked at several laws, and it's an ongoing basis. We look at laws all the time. We make recommendations, we make suggestions, we make submissions. We prepare, extensive documents and papers and submit them to the parliamentarians. But they are the ones, unfortunately, who have to decide which ones are of importance or priority to themselves, and those are the ones that they actually will move forward with. So the Law Reform Commission has done tremendous work in terms of recommendations for improving and changing and updating legislation. But in terms of prioritizing what gets to the floor of the parliament to actually get changed or modified, it's always up to the politicians. And, that's something that the commission has no control over. So, it's a scenario where maybe there needs to be some independent body that can say, hey, listen, these things have to go before the parliament and be approved, but as it stands, it still ends up being a political, hand picking as to which pieces of legislation are placed on the order paper for the, updating and modernizing.
I hear you on that, and you're right. That speaks to a broader issue as to whether or not we really have independent institutions in Trinidad and Tobago, because ultimately if it comes down to politicians making their final call, then we are a gum tree, essentially, which is where we are right now. But speaking in the broader context of this particular issue, there's the court of law, where apparently the AG has filed his whatever, and they're going to deal with it. But there's also the court of public opinion. And how do you see this playing out? Because, of course, for the for those in the PDP, those who would have said, look, we're tired of this 21 years of PNM governance in Tobago. We want change. We want fundamental change. How do you expect this to play out in the court of public opinion when it comes to this clearly going on the longer Watson Duke continues to be in this particular situation?
Well, I would actually even say the issue is bigger than Watson Duke, because in the broader context, Kazee, what we are seeing is almost as a pitching of camps. Basically, it is going to be central government versus the THA, once the THA is not of the same political persuasion as central government. And I think by this drawing of the line in the sand so early o'clock in the game, I mean, it hasn't even been a week, and you have a scenario like this in court already. So they're in litigation already, and it hasn't even been a week. So you know for sure that this sets the tone going forward. So it is not going to be a harmonious relationship at all in terms of, the working relationship with central government. And you already hear the picong and the movelang and the bacchanal on the sidelines, So therefore, it really does not bode well for the future of the working relationship between the central government and this THA. So I'm not sure that it was maybe the best way to handle it, maybe on both sides, in terms of, how they dealt with it thus far. But certainly it does not make it any easier or nicer in terms of a harmonious working relationship going forward with central government.
But it plays well in the politics, doesn't it? Because if the PDP...
Oh, yes, it does. It does. Because both sides are able to play to their bases to say, well, hey, look, you see central government is trying to oppress us. The political party is trying to oppress us. So that's why it's good we got rid of them, And then, of course, now those on the other side from central government will say, look, you see, these people, they're rude, they're out of place, they don't know what they're doing, that kind of thing. So it's just unfortunate, I think, for Trinidad and Tobago that we are embroiled in these types of, displays of political one-upmanship. So, I could show you, well, mine is bigger than yours, so to speak, kind of thing, played out in the national stage when there are bigger issues at stake and more serious things that we could be focusing our time and our energies on. And I think that the public is also going to get a little bit wary of, this type of, showmanship, that is taking place and grandstanding, when we could basically sit down as two big men and say, hey, listen, let's sort this out, let's work this out, that kind of thing. But unfortunately, it has reached the doorsteps of the court, and the judges will have to decide. Of
course, and again, because it's at the court, we have to be very, very careful to treading in that direction. But just on the issue of the people of Tobago, because those who would have voted for the PDP, even those who opted not to vote and so might be expecting something different, there's always that euphoria and expecting some transformation almost immediately. Is this a danger for the PDP? Well, however the Watson Duke thing plays out, however much people love Farley and whatever, there will be a level of expectation of immediacy as far as transformation.
That's right, and that's why I have said it more than once that what they have to do now is manage expectations and ensure that as far as possible they are able to live up to at least some of their pre-election promises. I think a few of the things that they can definitely try to manage would be if they display a level of transparency and accountability and good governance. Those are three things that are within your control. Those are things that you can do, and you can ensure that your members follow that, because I do recall they signed on to a code of conduct, and I think Mr. Augustine said that if any member of his team, engages in any corruption or anything, so he will dismiss them immediately. So therefore, if you live up to that and you show the public and you show the people of Tobago that you are keeping to that standard, then I think then you will be able to manage the expectation so that even if you're not able to deliver some of, I guess, the more grandiose and outlandish promises of, giving everybody money, etc., and house and land and all these things that are part of the normal platform rhetoric, I think that if you are able to do that, then people will understand, well, okay, maybe the other things you really can't deliver in the time frame, or maybe you can't deliver them at all. But at least I think certain standards, if they are able to set certain standards and maintain them in terms of your conduct in public life, and you set a certain standard for accountability, transparency, and good governance, then I think they would have at least achieved some of the objectives that they have set out for themselves on the political platform.
And Martin George, in the 3 minutes that we have left, is there any room in your mind, given the adversarial nature of our politics, for dialogue across, wouldn't it come across better for the PNM if it were to be learned that Faris make a call to Fali and say, look, let me talk about this.
But that's what I said. That's what I said a short while ago. I said it's unfortunate that this was not able to be resolved as two big men sitting down and saying, hey, look, let's discuss this, let's sort this out. And you see, let me tell you, Fizzy, sometimes being the bigger man might also mean saying, hey, listen, I was wrong. Now that I looked at it, I recognize
well, you're talking sacrilege there. Who says they are wrong in the public space in politics? You're talking real nonsense this early morning.
Well, but the thing is, notwithstanding the fact that our politicians have not lived up to that standard, it doesn't mean that we must stop trying to hold them to that higher standard and trying to call them out, and asking them to live up to that. And I think that is necessary going forward. And in fact, I think actually it would do the PNM well if they were to take a mature approach to say, well, listen, people of Tobago, okay, we understand, we've learned the lesson, we take the message that you've given us that, okay, you rejected us at the polls, however, we are not going to be spiteful or vindictive or vengeful, but if it is from what we are starting to see already, it doesn't appear that is the approach they're taking. It looks like it might really be the spiteful, vengeful, vindictive approach. And I think that would further alienate some people in Tobago, because they will say, hey, listen, okay, so you lost, and therefore what? You're trying to punish people in Tobago. So, I would think, I'm not a politician, Fizzy, and I stay very far from politicians, but the fact of the matter is, it would appear to be a more sensible approach if the PNM would be magnanimous in defeat and be, mature and be the benevolent leader that they should be in the circumstances, still showing that level of generosity and caring for Tobagonians generally, regardless of their political persuasion. But it may be that I'm being too aspirational and too optimistic in the circumstances for zero.
That is putting it mildly, Martin George. Magnanimity and benevolence. I think you're still a sleeper, so go have a cup of coffee. We want to thank you very much indeed. Anyway, attorney at law, Martin George, for taking the time to be with us.
Thank you.
You're more than welcome, Martin. No, but seriously, this whole idea, because clearly it works, this confrontation, this constant confrontation, it works in the politics of Trinidad and Tobago. It's not about for the benefit of the people of Trinidad and Tobago, but it works as far as the lunatics on all sides in that regard. 7:25 in Trinidad and Tobago. It's about time for us to take another break. We head to that break right now and come back into the last half an hour of Morning Edition.